So, you own or invest in commercial real estate here in Los Angeles. You already know that understanding your property's real value is absolutely critical. But that brings up a huge question. What's the appraisal actually going to cost you? Let's break down the numbers and all the factors that go into them.
So, what's the bottom line? What should you really budget to get an accurate valuation of your asset? Let's just get straight to the numbers, shall we?
Okay, here's the starting line, $2,000. That's pretty much the typical entry point for a standard commercial appraisal in the LA market. But, as you can probably guess, that is definitely not the whole story.
Right, because that's just where things start. The full picture shows a range that can easily climb to $6,000 and, sometimes even higher than that. So what pushes a fee up that scale? Well, it all boils down to the specifics of your property.
The biggest factor, by far, is the type of property you own. So let's break down the pricing schedules so you can see exactly where your asset fits into the puzzle. We're going to start with one of the most common investment types here in Los Angeles, multifamily buildings. Whether it's a small apartment complex or a big residential tower, the number of units is the key.
And as you can see, the pricing scales right along with the number of units. A smaller building, say 5 to 15 units, starts right at that $2,000 mark. From there, the price goes up with each tier, eventually hitting $4,000 for properties with over 100 units. It's pretty simple. More units means more complexity, and that means a higher fee.
Okay, next up, we've got office, industrial, and retail properties. For these kinds of commercial spaces, the main thing driving the cost isn't the number of tenants, it's the total square footage. And we see the exact same idea at play here. A property that's under 10,000 square feet, it starts at $2,000. The fee then climbs with each size bracket, topping out at $5,000 for those really big buildings over 100,000 square feet. Again, a larger footprint just means a more extensive valuation process.
And now for the properties that, let's be honest, often present the most unique challenges. Mixed use. We're talking about buildings that might combine retail on the ground floor with apartments or offices up top. And that complexity, well, it's reflected in the price.
Notice the difference here? The starting point, even for the smallest mixed-use property under 10,000 square feet, is higher. It's at $2,500. And that's because the appraiser has to analyze multiple income streams and different market types, like retail and residential, for example. The price scales up from there, hitting $6,000 for properties over 100,000 square feet.
So we've got our baseline prices based on property type and size. But, and this is a big but, these are just starting points. Let's look at the 3 key variables that can really adjust that final quote you get. First, size and complexity. Just think about it. Appraising a historic building with a totally unique floor plan versus a standard cookie-cutter warehouse. The first one requires way more analysis. Second, why do you need the appraisal? The purpose is key. Evaluation for your own internal estate planning is going to be less rigorous and usually less expensive than one that has to hold up in a high-stakes court battle. And finally, market data. In a huge market like LA with all its hyper-local neighborhood trends, finding truly comparable sales for a unique property can be a real deep dive, and that research time gets factored into the cost.
This quote just sums it up perfectly. The pricing tables we just looked at, that's your foundation. Any significant complexity, whether it's in the building design, its financial structure, or its specific little market, is going to add to that base cost.
Okay, here's a factor that a lot of people don't really consider, but it can definitely impact the price. The type of report you actually need delivered at the end of the whole process. You generally have 2 options. For those bigger, more complex assets, a detailed narrative report is the standard. It's a really comprehensive document that breaks down every single aspect of the valuation. But for smaller, more straightforward jobs, a form-based report might be perfectly fine, and it can help keep your costs closer to those starting prices we looked at. Matching the report to the property is absolutely key.
All right, you get the pricing tables, you understand the variables. So, what's the next step? How do you go from this general knowledge to a firm, specific quote for your property? It's actually a really simple 3-step process. First, just have the basic details ready: the address, property type, and its size in units or square feet. Second, know why you need the appraisal. Is it for a loan, an estate, a tax appeal? And third, with that info in hand, you can reach out and get a custom proposal that fits your exact needs. And that is how you get from a general estimate to a precise number. The key takeaway here is that while pricing has a clear structure, every single property tells a unique story. Understanding these cost factors empowers you to approach the valuation process not just as another cost, but as a strategic investment in clarity. So, with this framework in mind, What story does the value of your asset really tell?